Now that we have our core gameplay mechanic for Bot Bash Arena, our weapon system in place, we're going to introduce a resource system, something that the player has to manage and leverage to make the game either easier or harder for them. And in this case, it's going to be a heat system for our weapons. Our weapons have the potential to overheat, which could be really bad for us. However, as we fire our weapon, the fire rate is going to get faster and faster and faster, which is powerful. But also, the heat that the weapon generates is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So we fire at a faster rate, but we get more heat. Faster rate, but we get more heat. And if we generate too much heat, our weapon system will overheat and go offline. And there'll have to be a cooldown period in which the heat will dissipate or lower before we can begin firing again. And when that happens, we'll lose that rapid rate of fire that we built up, and we'll go back to our slow firing rate. So our resource system here is going to add a very complex and dynamic gameplay element that our players have to manage. So let's head to the computer screen and we'll dive right in. So I have lesson number 4's starter file open right here in vscode.dev. I'm going to minimize that file and I will open that file directly. So here's lesson 4 and I'll open lesson 4's starter file. So now we can see what we got here. So if I look here, it looks like in the HUD, I got some new information. Heat level, 0%. Weapon systems is online. If I start firing, all right, no heat is being generated at all as I'm holding this button down, and I feel like I should be firing faster and faster and faster, but the heat system's broken. Right now we're not generating any heat at all. So let's head over to our computer screen and let's see if we can work on implementing this new resource system of weapon heat. So mission 1 asks us to add the heat constants to our game. So we're adding a brand new system to the game, the heat system. And anytime we add a new system, we're going to start by adding constants in the student edit zone that we can adjust. We can tweak these values and it'll change how our game looks, plays, or feels. So let's see what we have here for the heat system. So the first thing I'm going to notice here is it looks like we commented out our fire cooldown in frames. So we're no longer going to have a set cooldown. So it's no longer going to be 11 frames, because eventually what I want to do is I want to fire faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And so that means the cooldown has to get smaller and smaller and smaller. We're going to vary it. And so what I have here are our minimum fire rate, which is set to 4, and our maximum fire rate, which is set to 25. So we're now going to use those values. And this is all based around running operations in a frames per second system. So we're going to assume that we're operating at 60 frames per second here. So I've defined that as a constant for right now. But then we have our heat system. So we're going to add our heat constants to track our weapon usage. So I've got heat gain per frame, heat cool per frame, and our heat recovery threshold. So heat gain per frame. How much heat will we gain every single frame when we have our mouse button held down? And it says heat is going to be a system that's measured from 0 to 1. So 1 would be the maximum amount of heat, 0 would be no heat. I'm going to gain 0.0008. All right, so a really small amount. But if that's every single frame, and so if I'm running 60 frames per second, so if I gain 0.0008 units of heat every frame and we run 60 frames a second, that's like close to like 0.05 heat, okay? So 0.05. So if I did 1 divided by 0.05, it's going to take me about 20 seconds of holding the button down to reach my full heat capacity. All right, and so now let's look at how much we're going to cool down. So it says here we want a faster cool down than heat up. So if I'm not firing, my system will begin to cool down. So like if I release the mouse button, we'll dissipate or lose some of the heat. So I'm going to lose, let's see, 0.0125 heat units every single frame. So what is that per second? So 0.0125, if we're assuming 60 frames per second, I'm going to, lose like 0.75 units in 1 second. So it's going to cool down rapidly, much faster than it heats up. So that's exactly what I want there. All right, and then I'm going to have a heat recovery threshold, because if the heat maxes out, if our heat eventually gets to 1, our weapon system is no longer going to be online. It'll say like overheated, and we won't be able to fire at all. But when we're not firing, we're going to begin cooling down our weapon system. And once it hits, let's see, 20% is what I have here in the comments. So 0.20, then we will unlock our weapon system again. All right, so there are the constants to our heat system. Let's go look at what else we have here for the heat system. We've got maybe any new colors. Let's see, any new colors? Looks like no new colors here. That's okay. And any new gameplay variables? Looks like we got a gameplay variable called heat, which is going to keep track of how much heat we have currently generated. It's currently set to 0. And then we have a variable that's keeping track of whether or not our weapon is overheated. And right now it is set to false. So this is a Boolean variable, something that would hold true or false. And when we start our game, we're just going to say, nope, we are not overheated yet. Mission number 1 is in the books. We've set our constants. We understand the heat system. Mission number 2 says, hey, let's reset our heat and overheat state on our game start. So we want to reset our variables, and this is in reset game to defaults. So anytime we refresh our page, or we have played and then we died and we want to play again, we got to reset everything. So that includes like our heat level and whether or not we are overheated. So right here, we've got to reset those variables that we just looked at. So heat, when we restart our game, like what if I set it to like, I don't know, if I set it to 0.6, is it going to show in here? Let's just take a look. Look at that. It's now set to 60%. That would be super duper bad. That would just be mean. If I set it to 1, that would be funny. You start the game already overheated. Not good. Not good at all. And so we don't want that. We want to set this to 0. And then let's do weapon is overheated. When we start the game, could I set it to true? Let's just see what happens. If I set it to true and I refresh the game, our system is overheated. It says overheated. I can still fire though, which is great. So that's kind of good. Whoa. Oh my goodness. What is going on? My heat level's in the negatives. We're overheated. I'm spamming bullets again. So some things are definitely broken. Let's set this to false, because when we start our game, we don't want to be overheated. So now upon reset, we should be set. All right, our heat level is at 0, our weapon system is online, and now it's back to working the way we want it to. So some weird bugs were happening when we set this to overheated. So we're definitely going to have to fix that. But at least now our heat system is in place. So let's look at mission number 3. Mission number 3 puts us in a function called update heat system. All right, and it says heat buildup. Increase heat while firing. Raise heat when the weapon is actively being used. All right, so before we get into this, let's see where we are in this function. So update heat system. So this puts us next to like update bullets. What else do we have? We have update heat system. It looks like that's mainly our only function here. And we've got a lot of missions here in this update heat system. Where are we calling it? So if I just scroll up, let's see. In our draw function, which is that default P5 libraries function, remember we get setup, we get draw. Setup runs once when we load the page or restart our game, and draw runs every single frame. So if we got 60 frames per second, this is running 60 times a second. We update our player, our weapon systems, our bullet, and now we are updating the heat system. So this function, update heat system, is getting called every single frame of our game. So look, we're asking a question. It says if weapon is overheated. So if the weapon is overheated, and right now it's set to false, but if it were equal to true, we take our heat variable and we subtract heat cooldown per frame. So if we've overheated, we begin reducing our heat. All right, so that makes sense. And now if you look, if this is true, we do this, and then we have an else command. Else means if the answer to this was no, it is guaranteed that we are going to run what is inside of this block of code. So basically, if the weapon is overheated, do this. If it's not overheated, we're going to do all of this. So the first thing we're doing is we're asking a question. If the mouse button is being pressed, if the mouse button is being pressed, we are going to add some heat to the system because we are firing. So let's take a look. If we're going to add, how much do we want to add? I don't know. We could add like, could I add like 5? Let's just see what happens if I add 5. All right, so our heat level is 0, and right now it's gone crazy again. We broke the heat system. My heat is currently at is at 150,000%. And the reason why is because our heat system is based on 0 to 1. So we don't want to add 5. That would be crazy. Instead, we have a constant variable that we can use. We defined heat gain per frame. I think we set it to be like 0.0008. So if I hit tab to auto-complete it, there we have it, heat gain per frame. So now when we run this, we should see our heat increasing slowly. Perfect. That's really great. And I believe, all right, so I wish I could have a stopwatch here to time this. I am going to pause the video and actually time this. I want to make sure to see, because I think we said this is going to be 20 seconds. Let's see. I'm going to pause the video. All right, so I just tested it, and I hit my like roughly 100% heat capacity. You can see I've overshot it. I went to 104. That took me 21 seconds. So like we're right there in the ballpark. So that heat increase is working really good. But right now, I'm not pressing the button at all. I'm not firing at all. So this heat should begin cooling down. We want it to cool down. So let's look at mission number 4. Mission number 4 is all about heat cooling. We're going to cool down the heat when we are not firing. So we're going to lower the heat over time when the weapon is idle. So as long as we're not overheated, right? If we're overheated, we're doing this. If we're not overheated, we're going to check to see, are we firing? If we're firing, we're increasing our heat. If we're not firing, I want to decrease my heat. So right now we're decreasing heat by 0. That's not right. We're going to decrease it by our constant heat cool per frame. All right, so let's check this out now. So now if I refresh the page, what's going to happen to my heat? All right, as soon as I start the game, our heat's going negative. But that's not good. Well, it's because I wasn't firing right at the beginning of the game. The heat just drops into the negative values. So that's not ideal. But let's see if I start firing immediately. All right, so now I'm firing. Heat's going up. Heat's building. And as soon as I let go, the heat should drop. So let's see. Yeah, and there you can see the heat drops nicely. But we have a problem. The heat can go above 100 and the heat can drop into the negative. Super, super bad here. Not what we want. So if we just scroll down a little ways, we get mission number 5, which is all about clamping our heat system. So to clamp a value means to constrain it between a lower and upper bound. And so we are going to constrain this heat value, much like we constrained the player's movement. Remember, we had to constrain the player's X value to stop right here or stop zoom all the way over here. We constrained their movement. We are going to constrain our heat value as well. So mission number 5, we're going to take the heat variable and we are going to set it equal to the constrain function. All right, now this takes 3 pieces of information. The value that you want to work with to constrain, that's heat. The lower bound, our lower bound is 0, and our upper bound is going to be 1. So we're going to go from 0 to 1 for our heat system. And I'll remember my nice little semicolon. So now constraining that value, if I refresh the page, I'm not going to fire, but the heat's going to try to go below 0, and it's going to say, nope, you went below 0. The lowest possible value you can have is 0. And it sets it right there. And if I spam and hold this button down, let's just see. I'll pause the video to get us close to 100. All right, so here I am at 100% heat, and I'm not going over it. And as soon as I let go, we should see the heat drop right down. So let's see. And so there we go. It drops down. And when it drops down, that heat is already tied to my fire rate, which is awesome. So if we look here at a heat of 0, I have slow firing. And when it was up to 100, it was getting faster and faster and faster and faster. You can see that increase in fire rate right now. So that's really quite cool. So we got to make sure we can fire faster and faster. We're building up that heat, and then we got to leverage it because somehow when it hits 100, we got to lock ourselves out, right? Our weapon system has to go offline. So let's look at mission number 6 right now. So we did mission number 5. Mission number 6 says prevent firing when overheated. So here we go. We got to lock our system when we hit an overheat of 100. So let's just see. So it says, oh, we're still in update weapons. So this is an update weapons systems now. So it says prevent firing when overheated. Disable the weapon when heat reaches maximum. Right now it just says if false. So we're asking a question, if false, and then we're returning. Inside of a function like update weapon systems, when you hit a return statement, it just stops the function. So nothing else in this function is going to run. So do we have a variable that keeps track of if we are overheated or not? Let's go look at our gameplay variables. So here are our gameplay variables. Oh yeah, we've got weapon is overheated. So I think we got to just check that state. So this is a true or false variable. So I'm just simply going to put weapon is overheated. If weapon is overheated, then we will simply get out of that function. And let's just see, are we setting that to true anywhere? Update heat system. Well, it looks like we're trying to set it here maybe, right? I've got like if this is like in mission number 7, weapon is overheated is equal to true. But look at the question we're asking. We're saying if false. That's always going to answer no. So I don't think we're going to lock our systems out yet. So let's just check. I'll pause the video and we'll check. All right, so if we look here, I'm at a heat level of 100. Look at how quick I'm firing my bullets now, but my weapon system is still online. And I think that's because, like we said, in mission number 6, we set up the infrastructure to lock our weapon system out, right? In update weapon systems, if it is overheated, we are returning. We are getting out of the function before we actually go through and spawn our bullets. So none of this will run. It's just that we've never set this to true. So now we got to go to mission number 7. And mission number 7 puts us back into update heat system. It's all about the recovery state. So we're going to trigger our overheat and recovery states. So if we look here, we're asking a question. Okay, it says if false. Well, that's always going to be no. So we want to ask a question. How do we know when we have overheated? When do we want to set weapon is overheated equal to true? Well, we have that heat variable. If heat is greater than or equal to 1, that means we have overheated. And so now we're going to set weapon is overheated to true, which means when we update our weapon systems right here, mission number 6, we are locked out of this function. We're automatically going to return. So we will not spawn any bullets. All right, so I think that should look pretty good. But we also then got re-enable the weapon once heat drops below the threshold. Yeah, because once we set our overheat to true, we want to make sure that we set the overheat back to false at some point. So we're asking a question. If weapon is overheated, so if we are in the overheated state and something else, then we'll set weapon overheated to false. Well, how do we know when it's time to get out of the overheated state? Well, we can look at heat again. We could say heat is equal to 0. We could do that. Heat is equal to 0. But we don't want to do that because I want my system to come online before that. And so I'm going to say if heat is less than, I believe we set a variable called heat threshold, heat recovery threshold. What did you set it to? 0.2. Yeah, perfect. So if we are overheated, and so like when we're overheated, we're going to decrease our heat value. If that heat value has gotten lower than 0.2, we're no longer in the overheated state. So let's check that out now. This should all be clicking together. So here we are. I'm going to start firing my bullets. All right. I'm moving around. Imagine there's enemies. We're spawning the bullets faster and faster and faster as we're building up our heat. So, all right, now it's beneficial to be in this higher heat state because I can go faster and I can fire more bullets. But it's dangerous. You don't want to get too close. So you got to let it cool down. You got to let it cool down. You got to let go and let it cool down. Because if you get too close, you're going to get locked out. So let's take a look. I'm going to get locked out. All right, and I got locked out. And you can see once it hit about 20%, the weapon system came back online. So that worked out awesome. That was really, really pretty cool. So this is good. I'm building up that heat. I'm going to pause the video to build up my heat. Okay, so the weapon system is going to overheat here, and then we're going to cool down, And now I can start firing again. So you could see in our HUD, it changed. Weapon system was online to overheated and then back to online. So this heat system is working really great. I mean, there's just one like slight problem I have, and that is if I want to track the heat system, I have to have my eyes up here in the HUD. But I'm sort of tracking my player. I'm keeping an eye on my player. So what we're going to do is we're going to visually draw something to represent the heat. So you can see how we have this green aura around us. What we will do is we'll fill in and draw a red aura that gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as we generate our heat. And when our heat level gets to 100%, that red aura will be the same size as our green aura, indicating that heat is at a maximum capacity. And I believe that's what mission number 8 is going to have us do. It's all about the heat visual. So this puts us in our draw player function. So in our draw player function, what are we doing? Well, we're calling no stroke. That means give me an invisible marker so you do not see the outline of the shape that I'm about to draw. And then it looks like we create a couple of variables here: body diameter, heat diameter, and then we're putting paint in our paint bucket, so the aura's color, and then we're drawing our player's aura. Then it looks like we put a brand new paint in our paint bucket. And this paint is not defined. It looks as if this paint is defined as an RGB alpha. So these are RGB alpha values. So all of the red, 255, a little bit of green, a little bit of blue, and then our transparency, instead of being from 0 to 1, we're defining it from 0 to 255 here. So there's a lot of ways you can define color. And it looks like at minimum, we have a value of 60, and then we're adding to it heat times 160. Okay, so the transparency, if heat is 0, then this is going to be 0. And as heat gets bigger and bigger and bigger, if we're full heat, heat is 1. This is going to be 1 times 160, which is 160. And our transparency would be 60 plus 160 is going to be 220. So almost full fully visible here for the paint that we're about to use. And so now we are going to create another circle. So I'm going to create another circle, and this circle is going to represent our heat aura. So I'm going to put it at player.x, player.y, and then I want a diameter whose value is going to change over and over again. If you look, when I wanted to draw the player's body, I used the body diameter. When I wanted to draw the player's aura, I used aura diameter. And here I want to draw heat, so I'm going to use heat diameter. We're going to explain what lerp is in an upcoming video, but just know lerp allows me to change from one value to another over a given range. So we're changing from our body's diameter, which is the diameter of this circle. So our heat aura is originally going to be the size of the body, and then it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it gets to be the diameter of the aura. So this is our starting value, our ending value, and how do we move through it? Well, it's based on this value of heat, which is from 0 to 1. And again, we'll talk more about lerp later, but this is going to allow us to change the diameter of our heat aura. So I'll put in here for our circles diameter, heat, diameter. All right, and let's see now if we're drawing that circle. And the order with which we draw these is important. So we're drawing the aura, the green circle first, and then on top of it, we're going to draw our heat circle. So this is going to be like a red circle. And then on top of that, we're drawing our body circle. All right, let's check it out. Let's see if this heat system is in place. So I'm going to start firing. I should get a red aura beginning to grow and get, right now it's pretty transparent, and it's going to get less and less transparent the bigger it gets. All right, so I can tell I'm not close to overheating yet. Oh yeah, you can tell it's definitely getting brighter and brighter and brighter. Perfect. All right, so we're really close. I should probably let it down. I'm going to let it down again. I lose some fire rate, but that's okay because I can sort of stay in this danger zone of quick firing. But if I overheat, let's see what happens. That red circle gets to be the same size as the green circle. Full overheat, and then it shrinks right back down, and I can start firing again at a slower rate at 20%. Awesome. hey, our heat system is working out extremely nicely. So now not only do we have like a weapon system that we can aim with our mouse, but that weapon system is pretty complex. There's a risk-reward situation going on here. Fire longer, you will have a faster rate of fire, but do it for too much, your heat's going to build up and you're going to overheat your weapon system. Once we add enemies, this kind of risk-reward system is going to make for some really great gameplay. So we'll pick this up in our next video. I'll see you then.